Can you start by sharing a little bit about your background in SEL with adults?
Yes. So when Melissa says SEL, that's social and emotional learning. And with social and emotional learning, a lot of our kids, as they grow up and they're working on building their skills, we focus on calling it social and emotional learning. As we become adults, social and emotional intelligence is what we have. So at some stage, it like crystallizes into our intelligence. How are we working within our environment? Are we noticing that other people are having different feelings and opinions? And are we acknowledging those in a healthy way? Are we creating a positive environment? Are we using our emotions to help us make better decisions? Or are they hurting us and keeping from making good decisions? So emotional intelligence essentially is really how in touch we are with our own emotions, and if we're able to use them in a way that harness better and more productive environments.
Part of the reason I was thinking about this is I think I have a passion and interest to be a lifelong learner and to inspire learning in other people around me. The hard part is sometimes once we become adults, we're like, we know it all. We might have some moments of growth, but we know what we're doing. We've got it. Our foundation is solid. That foundation ever gets rocked, it really disrupts our life because we're not used to being in a learning and flexible, malleable state. We don't feel as stable, right? If that's constantly changing.
Stress is actually a response inside of us to things outside of us, or even potentially inside of us. So understanding and labeling, which is what we do as humans. We label, is this good? Is this bad? Am I here? Am I there? And so we do that with our surroundings to know what is the best decision to make at this point in time. And so what I mean by that is if I keep saying like, oh, this is bad, life is bad, or the situation is hard, what does hard mean? And what can I do with that? Yes, could I drink a glass of beautiful wine and just be like, oh, this makes it easier? Absolutely. But that's not really dealing with the heart of it. So if I can pinpoint it and say, wow, I didn't get that promotion. So we could label that as bad, like I'm feeling bad about it. But if I didn't get that promotion, maybe I could say, I feel hurt because maybe I was told that, or I feel disappointed. Or when we can pinpoint that emotion and then sit with it and process it, that's a really healthy way to keep our mind and our energy well. Because once I know that I feel hurt, maybe that's me having a conversation with my boss and clarifying some things. Maybe that's me making a choice that changes the trajectory of my career. So that emotional intelligence, that identifying, that awareness, it changes the direction of our life. It changes the nature of people we want to be around. And it changes how we actually connect with them. So if you and me are in a relationship and I feel bad, well, does that mean I'm jealous? Does that mean that I'm feeling hurt? Does that mean that I'm feeling controlled? So when we can be really more granular with our emotional vocabulary, that helps our mental health, that helps our energy. And those are things that we were never really taught. I mean, I was never really taught that. I've lived around the world. I haven't really met many people who were modeled this or taught this. And this is why I think this work is so important, especially right now.
Based on the way that many of us grew up, we may not, like, this is new information, right? And so if we get to look at it as adults, we can do some learning in, and that learning in and awareness actually gives us back some agency and some control over these situations where we feel disappointed, frustrated, scared, nervous, and we don't know how to talk about those feelings, or we don't know how to process them or what to do about them. But if we can get behind the driver's seat again, at least we can say, okay, I'm familiar, I'm comfortable with my feelings right now. I'm understanding what's going on. So now I can make new choices. Like that gives you power back. Like I have this like feeling in my body right now of like, I'm literally holding a steering wheel and I get to decide what happens next, right? Like that's the experience while you were talking about that. And I think you did say the word control as well. And we sometimes talk about, you know, what's inside and what's outside and what we can control and what we can't. And it's so hard to just say, well, I can't control that and I need to surrender. But like there is space for control. So those of us who are maybe a little more control seeking, going in and learning in and creating a sense of awareness and familiarity with our own emotions and those processes and possibly those patterns gives us back that control we're looking for. So this could be an amazing process for adults.
And you know, control is an illusion. So we don't really control. What we control is inside of ourselves. We control our behaviors, our decisions. We control our performance, but we can't control outcomes. We can't. And so a part of this work and identifying, like being really specific about like, well, you're having a difficult conversation. What is truly difficult? Because what a lot of people find is like, if you think about our emotions like as a ball of yarn, if you really start pulling at it, it's not really what you think it is. And you can get a lot of great insights. Like for me, I just glossed over my feelings for so long that it set me into such a deep depression. And then I was prescribed medicines for to combat depression. And what I realized is it made me feel nothing. So I would rather feel bad than feel nothing. And I know that everybody has their own journey. So for me, that meant I had to sit with all the yucky stuff, all the emotions and all that. And I thought, like, our parents weren't taught this. Like, we weren't taught this. And unless you go to school for therapy, which is very, you know, unless your parents were therapists or they talked to you about this is not something that's so common. So to learn to sit with the yuck, or to sit with the good even, or to sit with the uncomfortable feeling of being whatever it is, that's a skill. And I think that's a skill that meditation has taught us, that it's more pervasive in the last, 20 to 30 years. And this is more or less a new way to look at, like what we do with emotional intelligence and teaching leaders. It's really saying, not like, what do you have control in this moment, but like, what's going on here so that you can clearly observe what's going on out there. Because we tend to have this filter. Like if I'm mad, I wake up and I'm mad. All my filter's mad. Somebody looks at me and I'm like, oh, what's their problem? They're mad at me. So we translate, we create these stories that are not true. But when we're really emotionally intelligent, we can go, you know what? I'm feeling really angry today about a call I had yesterday. I need to do this so that when I go into a space, I give that space. I give that opportunity to say, like, they're not mad. I don't know what they are. So I'm not going to come at it like that. And I think that really transformational leaders, they can do that. They can hold themselves, understand themselves, but also see what the people need around them.
That's really an interesting point. I'm starting to see now how this is shaping up in the way that when we have a certain set of things going on inside and we are looking through these lenses, it's how we make sense of the world. So we look for things that reinforce those patterns, behaviors, and ideas, because that makes us feel stable and right. And like we have that illusion of control. But if I really want to feel like I have a sense of agency, I want to go into situations without the anticipation, without the overwhelming stress, without the fear of wanting to make sure the outcome is a certain way, right? And so all of those things add to stress. For me, thank you for sharing a little bit about some of your journey. I have had a journey of my own. I'll share a little bit. I did have the opportunity to go through therapy for a while when I was younger. The circumstances of that, very, very challenging. The outcome of being able to get some of those tools young was really, really helpful. As an adult, when I started hitting some of those places where I didn't understand what was happening, I would look back at some of those tools and go, I'm trying, but maybe these are rusty tools, or maybe I need some more tools. So I knew there was stuff out there that could help me. So I was kind of willing to do that learning in and get more aware and and kind of figure out how to reduce the stress. We all understand what stress is. We know it, we feel it. So why don't we kind of look at it and say, if there's emotion behind that, if there's anxiety behind that, if there's overwhelm behind that, like, where can we create space to kind of go in and start, like, this idea of unraveling the yarn. I love that. I saw the cassette tapes we grew up with, right? And when like everywhere, and you're like, oh, I'm never going to be able to hear my favorite song again. It's going to be ruined. How do I get back to it? And somehow with that magic, number
pencil. Yeah, with a pencil, you slowly roll.
You found a way to get it all wound up. There might be some tweaks here and there, but you can listen to the song. Oh, this is working out to be kind of a nice metaphor, that there's like pain in that process, but I would rather get that song back or be back in the space of agency than stuck in stress with a lens that's just making sense of things, instead of feeling like I know why I'm participating in the world the way that I am.
So the lack thereof, we talked about awareness. The lack thereof is, I have a problem, I'm upset, I do something to quell that upset. I drink wine, I do something that feels good, like some sort of ice. I don't like stop and think like, what else could I do with this problem? I think that's a very normal thing. So like, oh, I feel stressed at the end of the day, I'll have a glass of wine. Over time though, if we don't have that awareness, we start drinking a little too much wine. And I know, because I've been there. I'm like, why am I drinking so much wine? Because you're not really looking at like the actual stress, the actual problem. So that's the icky part. And then when we realize we can do that, we're like, I'd rather not do that. So that's why I think it's important for, in terms of how I'm doing it, what we're doing here at Blue Light, at looking at coaching, because coaching is a really great place to feel safe and get insights to what the problems might be. Because oftentimes when I'm working with people, we start to see patterns, right? We start to see patterns develop. We start to notice that some of our old stories that we're running on, they aren't really true. We start to notice that we're working with some, like you were talking about, old tools or old information that hasn't been able to catch up to the reality of this moment. And so what I find is that people feel lighter. They're able to manage difficult situations because they're like, oh, it's actually not what I thought it was. It's this, and I can do this because I am XYZ, brilliant. I am, capable. I was chosen for this role because of my skills, because of my experience.
That's really fun. I'm actually excited. You said the word brilliant. It's a word that I have tattooed to remind myself that sometimes, just a little light and vibrancy and awareness and intelligence, it's all there. I love this. So here's a thought too. So we're talking about maybe some of the negative ways that we deal with stress, or maybe it's not negative right away, but it can become a negative pattern. There are other ways positively to deal with stress. I know for me, we were chatting about this earlier, physical activity is really, really good for that. And I've done a lot of reading around stress and have learned that there's kind of a cycle to stress, and that you can close your stress cycles using physical activity. And as someone who for the last year has had a really hard time being able to be physical, visualization, you mentioned meditation, can also help with that. Like visualizing running, visualizing doing physical activity can also help. Tensing our body and relaxing our body can help. So I'm wondering, are there any other tips and tricks that you might suggest around stress that maybe before we start doing a little too much of the wine, what can we try when we're maybe a little bit sooner, like earlier in the process, before we realize we've created a different type of concern for ourselves?
I'm never going to advocate against wine. Just know that, or your beer. If you like that, you do that. You be you. One thing I think that especially for me, has been really good is that noticing when you're holding your breath, because when you hold your breath, or when a person holds their breath, they are starting to lack control of that emotional regulation. And if we can breathe through the difficult moments or the happy moments, or because we hold our breath even when we're excited or we're in anticipation, but being able to just regulate our breath, that makes a huge difference. There's something called box breathing. I actually posted it, I want to say 2 weeks ago on our LinkedIn web page. And box breathing is, if you can imagine like a box, like just a small box, that's the pattern in which we hold our breath. So you breathe in for 2, 3, 4, whatever you designate, you do. And then you hold it for the same amount of time, and you release it, and then you hold it, and you release it. And in fact, that is the same breathing that fire fighters use when they're going into a difficult situation. I also learned that the firefighters also use meditation sometimes because they're often in a highly emotional environment, right? So they have to learn to regulate. If you have a meditation practice, that's always good. And you don't need to meditate for a long time. And I have heard people say, well, it's hard to sit still. There are so many great ways to meditate that require just listening to sound, right? Or just watching things. We can meditate in so many different ways. So I would say the first place I noticed that for me, especially when I'm holding my breath, that's like, okay, why are you holding your breath? Take some breaths. And then I name it. Like, what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling annoyed? Are you feeling sleepy? Right. So I try to go to breathing, regulate, and then naming it. Because naming it, there's an exercise called name it and tame it. So when you can name it, then you know what to do. Then you make better decisions. If I'm feeling sleepy but not recognizing that, then I might get into a car and do something that's not good. Or if I go, you know what, I'm really sleepy right now. I'm exhausted. I need to rest before I get into this car. Right. So we make better decisions. So that is, I mean, for me, I think the breathing is key. Meditation is key. There are 1,001 things that we can do, like when we exercise, especially. And another big one that I know is big for people is communing with nature. Getting out into our bigger environment and seeing that our problem, although important and although, big to us, we're just a small part of something really great. And so I actually read this morning from a study, what was it? That they monitored people and the sound of traffic caused more stress versus the sound of birds in nature, which caused less stress. So, hug a tree, get that tree energy, put your feet in sand or in dirt, healthy dirt, not gross dirt.
Healthy dirt. We're going to work with
healthy dirt.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
That's great. I've found that sometimes the easiest way for me to meditate is daydreaming and just really getting caught up in whatever's in my head in that moment and I feel myself disappear and drift away. Hopefully those are good things. I think the word daydream, for me at least, brings a sense of like calm and something pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
When we change our state like that, our brain doesn't really know the difference between what's going on in here and the reality in front of us, right? That's why I love having windows and nature around. It's like, oh, I'm not working right now. I'm hanging out with nature and looking at beautiful things and having a chat with my friend. So it can really shape, right, that experience. And it is meditative in that sense. Also laughter and fun, right?
Laughter, huge one. I think as adults, at least in what my experience in the time that I've lived in the States and abroad too, I think as we become adults, have more responsibilities, see things differently, that laughter can disappear, right? So laughter is a huge one for your like an internal massage, just like having that good laugh where you cry, you fall out of your seat. That's a huge one. And they actually did studies in positive psychology where they had athletes do different rounds of visualizations for in basketball. They had them shoot free throws. So they had one group actually do it. They had one group visualize it, and then a third control group do nothing. And they showed just the people who visualized it. Although the people who did it got 25% better, the people who visualized it got 24% better. So there is something to be said for visualization because our mind doesn't know the difference, right? Why not project a place in which you don't have stress versus sitting in the stew.
Completely. Yeah, I totally dig that. You mentioned positive psychology. So can you share just quickly, so blue light coaching is what you're doing now, and you have a ton of educational background. And so what is some of that educational background? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, I have a lot of certifications. So like you, I love learning. So here's another point of awareness. And I noticed this in myself even, is that I have to say, I love learning. So when I want to learn something new, I have to really ask myself, like, is this an overuse of this love of learning? So I have a lot of certifications. I'm certified in a couple of different ways of emotional intelligence, like techniques and tools, if you will. I'm certified in DISC as well. Do I want to get a whole bunch of certifications more? Absolutely. But I'm also certified in mental and emotional release, in master practitioner in mental emotional release, a master practitioner in NLP, and a master practitioner in hypnosis, as well as I'm getting my master's in coaching applied positive psychology, working towards my PhD in positive psychology. So I'm sure I forgot some sort of certifications I didn't do, or I did, but I didn't say. So, yeah.
I'll be very honest. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that have a lot of certifications and backgrounds in educational history. And perhaps it's because I'm so interested in this as well, but it starts to shape and help me understand what's behind what you're doing. Because when we talked at the beginning, you were sharing how you go into these stressful situations and you help to bring awareness and really bring kind of this social or emotional intelligence to leaders to put them in a position where there's less stress, there's less tension, there's less. Yeah, I think I'm just going to stick with the
conflict,
right? Conflict in that workspace so that they can get more from themselves, more from their teams, more for the company. Like it can just produce good and better. And I know that you also have, I'll just put this in as a last piece, you have this very particular desire to come across positively as well. That you don't want to say that you make assholes better people.
I don't want to say that.
That's not your vibe.
That's not my vibe.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And I think the key I'm very conscious about that, because that is a story in which people buy into, and that to me really lacks emotional intelligence, honestly. So that's why I don't want to label somebody X to be XYZ just because I don't like their behavior. It's usually a misunderstanding of them, the interpretation of it, or not having a good relationship with it. So if I let people, like if I talked about people like that as well, I think like, what a disrespect, right? And I feel like this work that I'm doing is a respect of who you are, understanding what you need, and then helping you get that and then transform the environment. So initially, yes, people do come to me and they say that like, oh, we need to fix this person or they're being this way. But I think at the end of the day, it's a person who's having their needs that are not met, or they're unaware of something. And we just have to bring that awareness to it. So it's like the light and the blue light, if you will. And by the way, the blue light is for all the blue lights that we have in front of us, our phones, all the blue light we work behind. But really, it's about just illuminating the person's best self. And I think to stay respectful, that is key to me. And that's like when people work with me, don't you want to work with somebody who's respectful, right? Don't you want to work with somebody who makes it such a great process? And that's really, I think, what is unique to how I work with people. And, crucially, at the end of the day, we're all people just trying to be understood and trying to do our best with what we know. And I think what I teach people is, when they know better, they do better, and they do right by the people around them and themselves. So.
I remember one day you shared that you wake up every morning knowing why you do the work that you do. And that is something I strive for all the time. I think we all wish that, right? We wake up and we go, I know why I'm doing this. I'm going to go do it.
Yeah. And that I think is a good visualization for the hard times. So when there is stress, You know, the other day I had this moment where I felt really stressed. Like, honestly, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I just had like the weight of the world on me. And I just like said to myself, you know, life is going to keep throwing this at me. So I can't just be like wanting to give up every time something's hard, but we do feel like that. I mean, I know I'm not the only one who feels like that. So I just think that when you have that greater thing that you're working towards, you know, that really creates purpose and that creates meaning. And that's why I do what I do. Because
Yeah.
here's the thing. I felt like from my career, from the start of my career, uh, there was so much negative. There was so many valleys, more valleys than peaks, that it was worth it. All of that was a great training ground for learning what I did not want in this world. So now this portion of life is like, okay, how do I help other people? Like, how do I undo that or make it better, you know, in a way, and make it right, you know?
Just
That's
kind of tilting the scales in the other direction.
Yeah, because the past is the past. What happened happened, and that was that time. But I have such a long future ahead of me. I mean, I'm going to at least live until I'm 130, right?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Sounds great. So there's so much more to be done good in the world. So that's where I'm focused.
Well, thank you, Diana. Thank you so much. There is a lot of good to be done in the world. A great reason for us to get all of this stress tamed and out of the way. I appreciate you chatting with me today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks.